Welcome to FCLE Seminar, the podcast where we prep up for the Florida Civic Literacy Exam. I'm your host, Mercedes Musto, and today we're unpacking Bush versus Gore 2000. This case, it sparked heated debates about your vote counting and the counting of your votes in a presidential election. What? Uh-oh, does that sound familiar? That's right. Let's get started. Landmark Supreme Court case number 23, Bush versus Gore 2000. Case background. Picture this. It's November, the year 2000, and the presidential race between Vice President Al Gore and Texas Governor George W. Bush is what's going on. Then, in December of that year, the Florida Supreme Court said something like to the Circuit Court of Leon County, also in Florida, hey, we've got 9,000 contested Miami County ballots, and we're going to need to hand count them. 9,000 votes tabulated by hand. This order came after the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Bush versus Palm Beach County Canvassing Board, and during Vice President Al Gore's challenge to Florida's election certification. In response, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, his running mate, appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which granted the request for review and issued a stay on the Florida Supreme Court's decision made on December 9th to hear oral arguments 2 days later. Whoa. Get this. The court also ordered that every county in Florida had to immediately start counting all of the undervote ballots manually. Undervotes? What's that? This is a vote, or rather like a ballot, where the voter did not indicate a vote for president. So there's a lot of problems going on here with inconsistent standards across counties, where thousands of ballots, especially in Miami-Dade County, are contested. And then there's all these undervote ballots that didn't clearly indicate a vote for president. Listen, it's so much more complicated than I can get into today. So I encourage you to look into the details of this case and how it affected American elections going forward. What are the big questions? First, did Florida Supreme Court overstep its bounds with this new election law by violating the U.S. Constitution, specifically Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, and was the recount process with its inconsistent standards across counties a violation of the 14th Amendment, particularly the Equal Protection and Due Process Clauses? That's a good question. The court's decision. The Supreme Court basically said in a 7-2 decision that Florida's plan for recounting the ballots was unconstitutional and violated the Equal Protection Clause. See, the majority opinion issued per curiam, meaning the court argued that the lack of uniform standards for counting ballots led to, quote, arbitrary and disparate treatment. Think about it. One county might count a partially punched, dimpled Chad, as they were calling it. They might call that a vote, and another county might reject it. Even within the same county, different recount teams could apply different rules. So the court said this inconsistency devalued some voters' ballots compared to others, which is a clear violation of equal protection. But here's where it gets trickier. The court went even further, ruling that there wasn't enough time to create a fair constitutional recount process. And to top it off, Florida's legislator wanted to meet a federal safe harbor deadline to ensure its electors were certified without a challenge. Safe harbor? What's that? Well, think of safe harbor as a deadline for the states. It's part of a federal law called the electoral count law. See, the whole idea is to get states to quickly deal with any election problems. Now, not everyone on the court agreed. Some justices argued that the Florida Supreme Court overstepped its bounds under Article 2 by creating new election rules. And that's something that only state legislature could do. This view leaned heavily on federalism, emphasizing that states, not courts, control their election processes. On the other hand, other justices agreed that the recount process was flawed, but dissented on, the remedy for this. They believed a constitutional recount was possible and that time constraints shouldn't override voters' rights. Two other justices went even further in their dissent, arguing that the Supreme Court should have deferred to Florida's court out of respect for state authority. They also stressed that the Constitution demands every vote be counted, and stopping the recount undermined that principle. The constitutional principle. We mentioned a few things here. First, Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, which states, quote, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress. But no senator or representative or person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. Okay, that's a lot. Look it up. And the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection and Due Process Clause, which states at the end of the quote, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Let's review. Here are the key takeaways from Bush versus Gore. Equal protection violation. The Florida Supreme Court's manual recount process violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment because it lacked uniform standards and processes. Number 2, no feasible recount. The court held that no constitutional recount could be conducted within the time constraints as Florida aimed to meet the safe harbor deadline, a part of the Electoral Count Act. Number 3, Article 2, violation. Some justices argued that the Florida Supreme Court violated Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 by creating new election law, a power reserved for the state legislature. Dissenting views included that the recount process was unconstitutional, but believed a fair recount was possible and should be pursued, as time constraints shouldn't override constitutional rights. And the argument was made for respecting the Florida Supreme Court's decision, emphasizing federalism and the principle that every vote must be counted. This decision remains much more complex than we covered today and still very controversial for its impact on the 2000 presidential election. That's it for this episode of FCLE Seminar. What did you think about elections and the Constitution? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Bush versus Gore reminds us how important, vital, and complex our electoral process can be, and how the Supreme Court can shape history in a single decision. Join us next time as we explore another landmark Supreme Court case to help you prepare for this exam. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those big questions. This is Mercedes Musto signing off.